just some context for clarification onto how that woman was manipulating me and how I manipulated her on the dynamic of her manipulating me, for those who don't know or who weren't aware. Yeah, this thing's mirrored. It's weird. This is going to my right, but on the camera it's going to my left. Ugh. Anyway. Right, yeah, there you go. So, at Professor, her name I won't give, but I'll give her first name, Linda. She is using grades to modify my behavior. It's behavior modification. That's what education is. It modifies thoughts to modify behavior. You shape people's minds, and therefore you shape their behaviors through education. Education occurs through media as well. Many children are educated, and thus their thoughts and behaviors are shaped through the television. So, essentially, she's like a dominatrix. She's trying to dominate and control my mind as a man, right? The gender equality, feminist, women's empowerment sort of thing. And so, when I replied, well, thank you, I never thought of that. This was manipulating her to believe that that I actually meant those words. But on top of that, that she was getting acknowledgement that she could compete with men in a man's world. And I think that influenced her decision to give me a 94.5 out of 100 on the last assignment. I'm just going to look at the last assignment here and read my what I submitted along with the assignment instructions, and you can make up your own mind on whether I deserve a good grade or not. The first assignment that I got a 44.5 out of 5, I pointed out that Christianity is very subversive and manipulative, and it's funny because a lot of whites and Christians that I see on alt-right websites accuse Jews of being subversive, but Christians are hyper-subversive, and so are whites. So they're accusing Jews of that which they're actually guilty of. Not that they're the only ones. Everyone plays that game of manipulation. I hit a point where I thought that, the Nazis were trying to manipulate me as a colored person against the Jews, and the Jews were trying to manipulate me as a colored person against the whites. Like I was just a pawn in this chess game. But I digress. So, one Christian subversion is the laws of the Bible, the Old Testament, don't really apply in modern times. There's a lot of ambiguity. They're very vague. So they are modified through interpretation, which is subversion, which I pointed out in that essay, which likely contributed to her giving me such a low score. I cited, I think it's 1 Timothy 2:12. The original English translation was, "A woman shall not usurp authority over a man." That was the King James English. And the modern Christians have modified it through translation, which is basically twisting the interpretation, right? It's subversive. It's lies. It's dishonesty to say, oh, they only meant spiritual authority. That's what my last female professor told me when I confronted her on this issue. And I replied, wait, you are exercising spiritual authority over men. This is a Christian university, and your wording here is very specific to the Creator. That was a biology course, and they were trying to mash in science with the 7 days of creation and the 6,000-year-old Earth plus the 70 million year old out of Africa theory. And they just said both of those things were true at the same time and didn't explain anything more as to how the Earth could be 6,000 years old, but we came out of Africa 70 million years ago. It's so stupid. It's insane how these people who are supposed to be so intelligent, right? These are college professors, university professors at prestigious university, could be so stupid. But okay. Right, and so it was like pulling teeth to get the truth out of a white Christian, or this particular white Christian, I should say. she tried to say, oh, because I'm not exercising spiritual authority, those laws only apply inside the church. And I said, oh, so as long as you're outside of the building, then you can exercise spiritual authority? Oh, no, it applies to priests outside of the building, but I'm not exercising spiritual authority. You are. This has very specific content about a man of God and the biblical worldview and blah, blah, blah. And she just stopped responding, which is what this professor also has done, because apparently when confronted, people just clam up and they stop speaking. So I brought up those things in that assignment, and I think that contributed to my bad grade. I pissed her off by pointing out how full of shit she was. Apparently women are allergic to accountability. But this next assignment, which surprisingly I got a 94.5 out of 100. So here are the instructions, and there was a lot of priming. She's not aware that I'm aware. She might be aware now, but I'm aware of priming. Priming is where you set someone up to believe something that they would normally not accept, right? You have to it's like a transitional stages to say America rejects homosexuality in the 1950s, so there's priming that occurred through the 1960s, 1970s, 1980s that gradually led to a greater level of acceptance. Priming, right? So that whole chapter was priming. And here's the assignment. After reading the Assailant Study, Mindsets and Behaviors, which was the FBI 2016 report that showed legalization of marijuana definitely contributed to an increase in homicides, including homicides on law enforcement. Congratulations, you are the new police chief in a rather large city where an officer-involved shooting occurred less than 1 year ago. This was 2016, by the way, so this is around the Trump era. The woke university professors, the wokeness from academia was reactive. Your officer shot and killed an unarmed man, but a jury acquitted the officer of all charges in the shooting. The announced verdict generated an uptick in crime in your city, resulting in a department now engaged in depolicing. See the Learn item, read the Assailant Study, Mindsets and Behaviors. Due to the lack of community support, over 30% of your officers have either resigned or retired. Your city operates under a council-manager form of government composed of a mayor and 6 council members, all elected positions. Before you even had a chance to put away your coffee mug on your new desk, your administrative assistant ran into your office yelling, "They're here," which she should have capitalized and she didn't. She gave me a 44.5 for not capitalizing things grammatically incorrectly, but she also doesn't capitalize things grammatically incorrectly. You find out that a protest march is underway, with numerous reporters working their way through the melee. Your community has lost trust in your police department and the local court system, and they are demanding that you do something. The city council members make their way into your office. Wary of your department's ineffectiveness, the city council members want to discuss reallocating funding away from your department to other local government agencies. One newly appointed member already has voted to deny a departmental request for much-needed replacement body armor. With all this in mind, you pause a moment and say, "Good to see you all. You saved me a phone call. Come, let's sit down and discuss what we can do to help our community." And the priming before this, just for some more context, was like a 28-minute and 26-second video on "We Hear You, the Death of George Floyd." And chapter upon chapter before that was about police racist, police bad, community policing, blah, blah, blah. It was really stupid and woke. And there's just more wokeness that's due Monday at midnight. So based on the scenario, respond to the following questions. As a police chief and a servant of God, you need to help restore order to the community while safeguarding officer protection. First, discuss the steps you would take to help develop a good working relationship with the city council members. Second, your attention now turns to your officers. As an experienced leader, you know that your officers need guidance and support. To lessen the use of force, your officers require training in procedural justice. When police officers deliberately engage with citizens in a considerate, supportive, or comforting manner. Discuss your long-term plan for your department with your officers. More context. Not only were we forced to watch the George Floyd propaganda garbage about Black Lives Matter, we also had to watch this thing about Tempe, Arizona community policing, and that just really turned my stomach because there was a bunch of blacks and Arabs and immigrants and women, and it didn't used to be that way. New Mexico didn't used to be so diverse either, and they kept saying diversity, 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 so I knew they deliberately did a demographic change, and academia is just helping it, just one of the tools that's helping once a heterogeneous, a wholesome, monogamous, and moral societies become viciously corrupt and therefore demographically altered, right? Now there's fucking blacks, and Arabs, and disgusting. I miss the way it used to be when it was mostly Spanish and Native American only. Fuck. Why are you guys so evil? Anyway. My submission. I would begin a dialogue to collect information on what the city council members express as unaddressed needs of the community. Politicians and media are often corrupt, which employs deception and misinformation as a tactic of manipulation. As a man of G-D, Judaism has a specific prohibition against gullibility. Rabbi Yochanan, Talmud Shabbat 13b. An emotional manipulation for political goals or other purposes strategically exploits gullibility of people in positions of power and authority. Given the circumstances, I would be skeptical of their motives, as politicians are opportunists that exploit a tragedy for gain. Given that they are already seeking to defund my department without accepting that the use of force was justified, as verified in a court of law, I would inquire if they were aware of all the supporters of their movement that were murdered by their movement, or other politicians in other regions who defunded the police and then became victims of crime, starting most recently with Shivanti Sathanandan. Diversity. Then highlighting it's physically impossible to choke someone from the back or the side of the neck, as the trachea is anterior to the cervical vertebrae and medial to structures like the scalenes, trapezius, levator scapula, sternocleidomastoid, etc. So there's no way the knee on the neck could have killed George Floyd, especially with the toxicology results in the autopsy report. If they cannot accept this truth, they are displaying their ulterior motives of exploiting a lie for political gain. Since most atraumatic deaths during police restraint of subjects in the prone position are due to prone restraint cardiac arrest, rather than from restraint asphyxia or stress-induced cardiac conditions such as excited delirium, Steinberg et al. 2022, and in the setting of a police encounter, metabolic demand will be high from anxiety, stress, excitement, physical struggle, and or stimulant drugs. Since 2023 has shown a switch from multiple city council leaders from defund to refund the police, which there is a scholarly article about that, Tegli and Mutarjvili, diversity. I expect this will be the best approach to develop a good working relationship with city council members. Just real quick, gonna pause. It's fun to watch diversity suffer from diversity and say we need to change things, even though they are the change that they're now suffering from. I would then tell my officers that it's not their fault they are being scapegoated for the harms caused by drugs, as George Floyd had cannabis, methamphetamine, and over 3 times the lethal limit of fentanyl in his system. I would specify that they should not place themselves or others at risk by hesitating to use force, because the implementation of this protocol has caused an increase in homicides nationwide, including black-on-black homicides, as several of the cities implementing defund experience large increases of crime. Again, Turgley and With Zhivili 2023, my long-term plan for my department would be to implement risk assessment over harm reduction. This is where I had to coddle, right? College is all about faking it. Risk assessment over harm reduction, which means if it's a greater risk to let them live than pulling the trigger, pull the trigger. Placing victim well-being over criminal well-being as mercy to the criminal is a second crime to the victim. Building community partnerships, change management, and problem-solving components, Bowman Haley 2021, would be implemented, but not blindly, with no consideration for where or why they haven't worked in the past 5 years. And then I cite all my sources. It looks like I messed up on the on the size of the font. But there is literally an article in the Journal of Forensic Sciences from 2022 about all these deaths that occurred exactly as George Floyd's, and they were all due to drugs in the system. And then in the responses, because these other people were lying, they were telling the professor what she wanted to hear, not what they wanted to say. Maybe it's what they wanted to say. But I found out in Albuquerque, for example, that criminal justice reform is causing an increase in crime, and that's why I'm surprised that I got a high score, which I'm assuming is because I manipulated her. I showed a lot of images of the victims of criminal justice reform, like Ryan Carson, who was stabbed by a black guy despite being pro-Black Lives Matter, right? The victims of the Waukesha, Darrell Brooks, the Waukesha mass homicide, mass vehicular homicides. And there was another one, I can't remember her name, it was like Mari Puri something, who was an eco programmer, Black Lives Matter, and she was murdered by a black who was released early, specifically due to criminal justice reform, and clearly had marijuana in his system in both mugshots, from the 2011 arrest and the arrest after murdering this woman, after raping and then murdering her, even though she was saying, "I'm on your side," as he was doing it, right? That's him in the mugshots. He can barely keep his eyes open because he's so high. On a side note with that, it's interesting to be validated as correct. When I saw the Robert Bowers incident, right, the mass shooter at the synagogue, and the Darrell Brooks incident, both of those were incited with marijuana and media. Darrell Brooks, it was cannabis and, Facebook and Instagram and all the mainstream social media sites that were specifically inciting anti-white violence, along with anti-political violence, right? Anti-conservative, anti-Christian, anti-white. It's really stupid. And whoever really incited Darrell Brooks will never be held accountable. But with Robert Bowers, he grew marijuana, so both of these incidents could be cannabis-induced psychosis, and he was incited by alt-right sites like Gab, etc. So both had two primary causal components, which are cited in the FBI Assailant Report of 2016: cannabis and social media. And I've been saying that forever, and all these liars on the internet were in the comment section, "No, you're wrong, marijuana is harmless, And no, the FBI actually agreed with me and published this report since 2016. Anyway, I digress. Oh yeah, and then the officer-involved shootings have declined, and homicides have increased. The reduction of force policies are causing an increase in violent crimes. And the assignment, this is more psychological manipulation, the assignment was set up in such a way that they didn't want to give me a choice to say, you know what, the first thing I would do was just order my officers to disperse the riot, peaceful protest my ass, disperse the riot with extreme force, extreme prejudice. Don't be nice. Don't be soft-handed. Don't pull your punches. Go out there with some nightsticks, some clubs, some tear gas, some pepper spray, some bear mace. Or hurt them. Put them in the hospital. Dude, I don't care. Just teach them a lesson they won't forget very soon. They didn't give me that option, which is exactly what I would do. Isn't that wild? No, you're supposed to coddle the corrupt politicians and the rioters, but also not lose your police and get them to be less enforced. Laws are only as good as those who enforce them. And where I live now is a perfect example of why law enforcement is necessary, even if it's corrupt, which it has become very corrupt in the United States. I'm not disagreeing with that. As there has been no arrests of corrupt politicians, this alone is a huge symptom for corruption in law enforcement and military. Where I live, people do not choose to do the right thing voluntarily. They have to be forced. If it wasn't for police enforcing laws, the first month to 5 months would be marijuana, and then methamphetamine and heroin needles and homelessness, etc. It would gradually become San Francisco-ified, Portland-ified, Seattle-ified, right? To where you'll have people overdosing on fentanyl or meth right in the street. Yeah, daily. Among other things. So there is human nature is corrupt, maybe, but law enforcement is essential. So I think it's and then on another, because we're supposed to give 2 responses in these things to 2 other students, and there's another student whose last name was DeShields. No, there you go. And I simply said, there are certain ethnicities that specifically commit more crime. Oh wait, I'll word it exactly as I said it. Another factor is weaponized media. In recent years, the media has specifically been used to incite racial hatred against whites, despite whites being over 90% of food production in the United States and a low percentage of violent crime perpetrators in comparison to other ethnicities. And he also talked about pushing body cameras, and then I said, I think BLM were the ones who initially pushed for more body cameras and then flip-flopped on the issue when cameras started clearing more officers of misconduct allegations by criminals of color, as those allegations tend to carry an implicit insinuation of racism. Recriminalization of cannabis and aggressive enforcement of drug laws would eliminate much of the violent crime it's been causing. Oh yeah, and then I actually posted that image, so let's see here. What? Move it, downloaded it. How silly. The woman's name was Ecomap Tech CEO, Pava Marie Lepere. Yeah, beaten to death in her own home. Black male released early from prison, right? Yeah. But my other response was, also, it was a 500-word maximum limit. Hopefully we're not being graded unequally in the name of social justice. And that's because I have a friend who went to this school, and, when I told him about this stuff, he said, don't even bother, working really hard on your assignments, because he was in this school, and they had an assignment where this black girl did none of the work, and he worked on his assignment really hard, like 3 weeks in advance. And all she did was show 2 pictures of a guy in a wheelchair and then a guy walking with canes. They weren't even the same guy in the 2 pictures, and she was saying, see, he was in a wheelchair, and now he can walk. And she couldn't answer any of the questions as to, like, what war he was in, how it happened, etc. She just kept repeating that one sentence over and over again. He was in a wheelchair after the war, and now he can walk. And she got an A, because it was a black teacher and a black student. And the dean was there, and the dean walked out, but didn't do anything to change it, because, Black Lives Matter. So, I'm guessing that's why I didn't get in trouble for making that comment, is because it's true, and people in Liberty University know that black students are being coddled and given high grades just to artificially manipulate their dropout and the lack of success rate with the increase of black students.